Good to have Todd McShay with us Mondays. As always, the McShay Show, Saturdays, Tuesdays, Thursdays. I know you guys did a breakdown of Georgia, Florida, also some Ohio State, Penn State stuff. So there's a couple things that I want to do from that. But let's start with the NFL. Detroit feels like, well, I don't know if I can say they're the most complete team, but they feel like they're marching towards best team in the NFL, despite the fact that Kansas City's undefeated. But maybe we're just holding Kansas City to its own standard because Kansas City's a much better defense to this point of the season than Detroit is. But when you watch the Lions play, dominant on the road in Green Bay conditions, and they look like the more comfortable team through it all. I know Love's dealing with the groin injury, but just takeaways on, like, if it were right now, if Detroit were playing Kansas City in the Super Bowl, who would you pick?
Well, let's start with Detroit, right? I guess the big question mark was how is Detroit going to play outside, in these conditions? And they seemed like the outside team. They seemed like, they were not a dome football team. They handled the conditions better. And yes, part of it was Jordan Love just not being himself and dealing with the groin injury and making some, I don't want to call him uncharacteristic mistakes because he still makes some mistakes where you're like, oh man, come on. But it just felt like Detroit, like the conditions were not an issue for the Lions, and they jumped them early and were able to kind of then lean into playing with a lead, and it looked the way you would expect a team that is used to playing outside look. And that was the big question mark, right? I think this, and then they've got another game. What is it, at Chicago late in the season? But other than that, they're like a lot of warm weather dome games. They're protected. So the biggest thing for me is how complete this team looks. Defensively, yeah, they lost Hutchinson, and you can't make up for that, but they've been able to make up for that so far. And they're doing it, but they're blitzing more. And they have, when you blitz, the obvious issue that comes with blitzing and being more aggressive is that you leave yourself vulnerable in the back end. They've handled it extremely well. I love their safety tandem, Joseph and Branch. And Branch gets kicked out of that game, and Joseph steps up and has the huge pick. I think that's 2 weeks in a row with an interception. I've always loved Joseph. So I think the fact that they're making plays on the back end, the fact that they're dialing up pressure at the right time, are they as good as Kansas City defensively? No. But they're damn good. And offensively, I don't think there's any question the more efficient offensive team. And that's Detroit. It's kind of weird to say with Patrick Mahomes, but it's been a couple of years now with, struggling in the regular season on offense, weapons, whether it's injuries or losing guys in the offseason, they just don't look as dynamic and explosive as they have. And as they had been in years past. So, I don't know about you, man, but like, it's so impossible to sit there and be like, yeah, I would feel great about Detroit against Kansas City in a Super Bowl setting because you got Mahomes and you got that defense. But right now, the better team in my mind, when I'm watching games on Sunday, the better team has been Detroit. I mean, offensively, like St. Brown, what he's doing, just so consistent and so dynamic. Laporta is a stud at tight end. We knew that from his rookie year, and it continues to be a huge factor. Jamison Williams isn't even in. He'll be back at some point, and when he comes back, he adds another element. But this Khalid Raymond, the Holy Cross kid, has stepped up the last 2 weeks in his absence. So you got the two-headed monster running back. Jahmyr Gibbs has been everything they had hoped for and more as a first-round pick when everyone was just bashing Brad Holmes. And we talked about it right after the draft. Like, yeah, you can yell at them all you want, but they got huge difference makers with their draft picks. And just the way that they were able to load up on picks for a 2-year span and how productive those players have been from the early rounds. Like, this is an organization that has built it the right way. And the product on the field has been phenomenal. And Jared Goff, like, how about that stat? Did you see that stat? The Lions have, in the last 6 games since week 3, I guess, have 26 touchdowns, and Jared Goff has 22 incompletions. Like, that's outrageous, man.
Yeah, there's all these stats where, in the past I would wonder, okay, what's your completion rate? And then that doesn't seem to matter as much because the design of some of the throws in the offense. But Goff's at 75% right now. It's number one in the NFL. Yards per attempt. I used to think that was super important. Then I started thinking like, well, can it be a little misleading here? And Goff is number 2 in the NFL, only behind Lamar Jackson. And that's always the one with Mahomes where you just can't believe how much that number keeps going down and down and down because he's changed the way he's played quarterback based on personnel and some of that other stuff.
So
Look,
if the game's tomorrow, we're here, we're prepping the show, and it's a neutral site. They have to line up and play tomorrow. Who are you taking?
I'm going to pick Kansas City.
Yeah, because you always do. Because Mahomes and you're always right. So,
yeah, but the fact I'm even thinking about it is like as much credit as I could give to another team. Because I'm with you. Like as you said here, it feels like Detroit's the best team in the NFL, and yet Kansas City's undefeated. We'll see what happens tonight. The whole thing. I think that itself is like a compliment. I really do. I don't know that you have to say I'd pick Detroit. You know, it was Detroit or the field. Well, of course you would take the field, but the fact that it could even be a topic, I think, is a credit to where they're at.
Who in the NFC?
The last years.
Who in the NFC scares you the most? There's competition.
Well, I'd like to see Green Bay with a healthy Jordan Love, so I think that's an issue.
Does Washington scare you? Minnesota, Philly? I'm not saying. They're all good teams. I'm just curious, like,
I don't know. I still think a healthy 49ers team is scarier to me than Washington, Philly, or Minnesota. I just have a hard time quitting the 49ers. And maybe that's ridiculous because they're not even in the playoffs this morning. They're the 11th seed. Who would you pick? I mean, would you rather play Arizona or San Francisco if you're Detroit?
Right now?
Yeah.
Like today, maybe San Francisco, but where they're going to be at the end of the season, I would bet everything on San Francisco being better than Arizona.
What about Washington?
It's hard, right? Washington's good, man. They're good. You know, Jaden Daniels has come back to earth a little bit, but not, but like still dynamic. But they're a good football team. But if I like crystal balling it, I think San Fran has a better chance. There's a good chance to be better at the end of the year. Minnesota scares me. I think they're a damn good football team. I really do. Yeah, I think they're there. Like this is real.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I'll admit that there was part of me watching the Colts game last night where they're down 7-0 at half. And I'm like, is this Minnesota story over based on the standard that we'd have for them? You know, the defense is rolling. Darnold's figured it out. They have the best wide receiver. You know, like they get Hawkinson back.
Yep.
And yet they're down 7-0. They've lost 2 games in a row.
God, that was a brutal first half.
Right. And I was watching it going, okay, the Lions won, no problem, because we've spent so much time already gushing about the Lions. The Rams one is weird because the Rams have been like 3 different teams this year.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't seem like it was some awful loss. Just there's certain weeks where if you get Stafford on the wrong week, like he might just beat you because he's been so good. But then when they're down 7-0, and I'm kind of doing some of my college football notes and everything, I'm sitting in my kitchen island and I'm like, maybe this Minnesota thing is just kind of over.
Yeah, but it's
you don't think so, though?
No.
Okay, good.
No, I don't. I mean, remember, they lost to Detroit by 2 points.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Okay.
I don't think Philly can get out of its own way, but go ahead.
I really like Philly the last month or so.
Yeah, I do too. But I just, do you trust them in a playoff environment against one of these teams? That's where I don't have a whole lot of trust.
Here's what I would say, though. Like, of all these teams that we're constantly trying to figure out because it changes because of injuries and sometimes it's like interior linemen that we're not aware of. Like, they're on their 3rd defensive tackle, that kind of stuff. You're like, oh, okay, now I see why they're. When you're as talented as they are, then they are. Like, even the worst version of Hurts can't be like the best version of him was considered the best quarterback in the NFC going into just last year at the start of 23 after the Super Bowl appearance in 22. So I would rather you have a bunch of dudes that I can still name that I still think are good. But maybe that's part of what's been misleading about the Eagles. Like, I just think that team is more talented than Washington is, although Washington's front is really nasty right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing else on that?
No, I like Philly. The talent is absolutely like undeniable.
Okay.
I just wonder if they can get out of their own way when we get late in the season, playoffs, critical decisions, coaches putting team organizations in the right spot. Will they make the right decisions to allow all that talent to come to the top? That's where my concern is.
All right. Can we talk about Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah.
All right. So I spent a good chunk going through that last possession where he throws a pick on first down that's like a fourth down throw. All right. You want to throw that on fourth down, fine. But like, they still have plenty of time left. They've moved the football. There's a chance they're going to pull this out. And I think he missed 6 of 7 throws other than the first down. There's one that's a PI. You could argue that's why I think he might have missed the throw anyway, even with the PI. So maybe you can say 2 were fine. What is he? How did this happen? Because at least we know there's like real college stuff that was pretty good. And it felt like after his rough rookie year that so many really good quarterbacks have, there was a significant jump into his second year. Then you have Peterson. It's just, there's even some numbers that tell you he's actually like better than you would think, which is kind of crazy. Some of the QBR stuff. But I think most of us watch it every week going, what is this guy? Like, what happened?
You have to wonder I'm starting to get worried. Let's put it this way. I'm starting to get worried that this is Trevor Lawrence, right? That his rookie year was just throw out the tape. His second year was getting in a system, kind of seeing like the league seeing Trevor Lawrence in a system that's functional and taking time to catch up with it. Guys that I talk to in the league that have a better understanding, like defensive guys that like understand, like I get the strong sense that they feel like Doug Peterson's offense has peaked in terms of what they can do, what they can create. I don't think it's helping. I'm not saying it's a bad system or it can't be successful, but I do think there's some schematic things that are not, necessarily putting Trevor Lawrence in the best position to win. But at the end of the day, like, we saw really good signs from him that second year. Last year, we saw a quarterback that was battling injuries, didn't feel like himself, and was kind of always behind the 8 ball. And I was expecting this year to be a bounce back, to be quite honest. And I don't know that there's lingering injury effects. I think there's lingering mental effects. Here's what I see. Because I've studied this a lot, because it's frustrating when you have that high of a grade on a quarterback and for him to play this inconsistently and poorly, like he has for this long of a period of time. You got to kind of check yourself, right? And so I see a quarterback that all of a sudden is like not inconsistent, but really bad versus the blitz. And that's part scheme. It's part plan, you know what I mean? Like not having the right plan and the right ways to navigate through that. But it's also there's something in his brain that's not clicking and functioning the way it needs to, where that it's causing enough disruption for him, where he doesn't trust where he's going with the ball. He doesn't trust what he's seeing. He doesn't have a confidence level in what his plan is to beat the blitz. And that's not something you expect to see with an NFL quarterback with the experience that he now has, right? And so that's been frustrating to watch. Bigger picture, I don't see a quarterback who's comfortable with his footwork, who's consistent with his footwork, who's, it's like, it's more stuff that we talk about in college prospects than we do with NFL guys. How many times do you and I have a conversation about a 4 or 5 year vet in the NFL at the quarterback position, like, his footwork's a mess? It just doesn't happen a lot. You know what I mean? Like Josh Allen, we had that conversation coming out of Wyoming. Josh Allen, we had that conversation as a rookie. But now your full-time job with the support that you have, with quarterback coaches, with the off seasons you have, like it gets to a point, right, Ryan? Like it truly gets to a point. I guess it's like a shooter in the NBA. It gets to a point where your footwork and your shot are the same. Like, and now it's not about tweaking it and improving it, or like, it's about just drilling it over and over. So it's muscle memory, and it's like, that's who I am. I don't know the NBA, like I don't study the NBA like you do, but I would find it hard to believe there are a lot of guys that 5 years into their career, you're like, well, if he could just get his footwork and his base right, and you know, or is changing his shot. Like I don't hear that a lot in NBA coverage, and I know you don't have that a lot with NFL quarterbacks. So the why behind it all is hard to pinpoint, because I'm not in that building every day, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm not an NFL defensive coordinator who can sit and walk through like the minutia. But I am an evaluator, and I see the tape, and I see a quarterback that is dealing with footwork issues, fast brain, rushed process, lack of confidence in his plan and where his eyes should be. And that shows up on tape, and that shouldn't occur at this point in his career.